AP on a stick. This is the second way of doing a pre-deployment survey. AP on a stick. As you can see from the name, you need a tripod for this. On which you can just mount the AP here. Okay. And you can stick a battery to power on the AP, or you can have an external power supply, whatever you want to use you can use, but just make sure you have this equipment if you're going to do an AP on a stick. The tripod should be easy to move because you'll be moving it around on the floor a lot. So for AP on a stick, this is takes too much time, but it is very accurate, and it is slightly costlier than the predictive survey because the person has to be on site and spend some days to finish the whole building. Let's say even if he wants to cover 4 or 5 floors, it takes a lot of time to cover that. So anyway, this is more expensive. So as I said in the last video, customers prefer predictive plus RRM, but AP on a stick is the most accurate pre-deployment survey that there is. So we'll learn about AP on a stick for now and see how we can execute this on the ground as well. What all things to keep into mind before we go ahead and do it, and how to approach this. So for a proper coverage analysis, we need to do an AP on a stick. Before we even get to this, you take a floor plan from the customer and get yourself familiarized with the layout. Walk on the floor, you see where everything is, so that you get an idea of what you're about to do. So it's basically for a proper coverage analysis, and this is actually a must because there has to be some sort of a metric, some sort of a way you can capture the RSSI value, kind of like an RSSI meter, or some people use the Ekahau tool, and in that Ekahau tool you can actually plug in a few Proxim adapters which will listen to the signal coming from the AP. So anyway, you can use an RSSI meter as well, which will be able to capture the RSSI value at any point that you're walking. So AP on a stick is done like this. So I'm going to just quickly tell you the steps on how to do an AP on a stick, and this will help you identify the potential AP mounting points where you should mount the AP. So in the previous video, if you remember from a predictive survey, you feed the floor plan in the tool, and then you actually mark the attenuation, scale the floor plan, and then you start placing the APs, and then understand with different what if scenarios, that if you move the AP here and there, and how will the coverage get affected. So you select a value of the power level of the AP, you select what RSSI threshold you want, and then based on your requirement, and then you start playing around with the simulation, and that's where you understand the right AP positions. It can be done remotely sitting in a room. This one has to be on site. So once you have the tripod right here, the one major mistake that usually people do is they mount the AP here and they power it up to the maximum power of the AP. Let's say in my area 100 milliwatt is allowed, okay, for the AP to transmit by my country's regulations. So usually what people will do is they'll just go and mount the AP here and power the AP to the maximum power, and then start doing the survey. This is not a good practice. You should always keep the value to a reasonable level for a couple of reasons. Of course, one is because the client adapters that are really working, they work somewhere around 30 milliwatts. Okay, so if you put the AP on 100 milliwatt, then what you're really doing is this is a cell, and then my AP is broadcasting at 100 milliwatt, which means I can the signal right here. If my client is sitting at the edge, my response to the AP may not be able to even reach the AP because it's at 30 milliwatt, right? So the AP may not be able to hear me, but I'll be able to hear the AP. So if my frame does not reach the AP, it's going to assume that okay, or my acknowledgement doesn't reach the AP, it's going to assume the frame was never received. It's going to retransmit the frame. So you can have this kind of discrepancy if the power level of the AP is too high. So we'll not go down that road in this video, but yeah, That's pretty much why you would need to optimize the power of the AP as well. The second reason is, after the site survey is performed, the power can be increased if needed to meet the unexpected coverage needs, right? Because if you do a site survey, there's still a small chance that you might end up with you might end up needing some more coverage in a particular area. Maybe there was another cabin that came up in the future. You never know. So for to keep into that, some buffer value you need to keep into account. So always keep the AP power around 30 milliwatts, or I can say it's around 14 dB, 14 dBm of power, 14.8 or 15 dBm approximately. Okay, so use this power level of the AP to do a survey, and you should be good. So now you have a tripod. You have a tripod now with the AP mounted on top till the height of the ceiling and powered up at 14 or 15 dB or 30 milliwatts of power level. Okay, now how you do an AP on a stick is slightly tedious than the normal predictive, but I'll just tell you how we do it. This is the floor, for example. Okay, so you take your tripod, you go right at the corner of the building, and then you start walking diagonally inwards. And let's see, okay, I see that at this point I see a signal of minus 67 dBm. Now you can define your networks at minus 67. In the initial days when we used to do an AP on a stick, we used to take the value of minus 70 dBm. Okay, for data traffic. For voice, we would go for minus 67. But nowadays, every network is high density. We have a lot of clients, so we design for capacity. So we want to take a value of minus 67 to minus 65. But let's say we come to a point where in the RSSI meter I see a value of minus 67. Okay, so I place the AP right here. The first step is place the AP here in the corner. Start walking diagonally and reach here where you see, okay, the point where I get the signal of minus 67, I reach here, and then I place the first AP right here. This is the placement of my first AP. Now from this AP, okay, you walk in a straight line parallel towards the building, and then you see again, you read the RSSI meter and you see, okay, I see a minus 67 dB of signal strength here, dBm of signal strength here as well. So you'll just mark the point, or I would place an access point here. Let me make it better. Okay, I place a temporary access point here. Okay, and then from this point I walk again towards the left hand side, and then I see, okay, minus 67 here as well. From this AP, this point, I will put an access point here. Now if I put an access point here, my coverage will look something like this. A minus 67 dBm cell. Similarly for this AP, it's going to look something like this. Okay, now if you remember from our earlier videos, you need a minimum overlap of coverage cells to get roaming done properly or to have the client performance good on the ground. So based on the number of, or based on how much coverage you need or how much overlap you need for roaming to happen, I would go for a 15 to 20% overlap, okay, of the coverage cells. So I would move this AP slightly here, 15 to 20% from the distance from the first AP. This is the first AP. So that now when I move the AP somewhere here, and this first AP is right here, the coverage area becomes something like this. So now this is my first AP position, this is my final second AP position. So you have to perform these 3-4 steps to get started, to get your final 2 AP positions, and then so on and so forth. You can just repeat the same steps. Go walk towards the left, get to a signal where you get minus 67 dBm, and then put the access point here, and then again walk towards the left, get a tentative location of the new access point, and then you'll get the third access point. So similar to that, this is how you do an AP on a stick. Okay, this is not easy because if you have to cover an entire floor, you're talking about 20 APs or so, 10-20 APs. It's going to really take a lot of time. Okay, so do this, and before you even during this task, you have to understand that getting to a point where you see minus 67 and noting it down is very important, because you don't want to have any discrepancies there. Before the site survey, identify the right RSSI value for you, understand from the customer what the requirement is, get to the right RSSI value, and then start the survey. Okay, once you do that, the aim of this exercise is to receive an optimal RSSI value, or the RSSI RSSI measurements from at the cell edge. You get the SNR values, you get the noise floor values. If you're using an RSSI meter, that's good. If you're using a tool like Ekahau and you're doing an AP on a stick, it's going to give you not just these, but a lot of other values as well, because that is an advanced tool, or an air magnet tool. That's an advanced tool. You will get a lot more values which will help you identify and get better outputs of the particular survey. So this is what, this is how you do an AP on a stick. Honestly, in my 11 years of career, I've only done this 3 times, because a lot of customers don't prefer this, because when you tell the customer the cost of this, they usually want to go down the predictive analysis route. But anyway, this is still a valid survey. It's in fact the most accurate survey, and a lot of customers still think that this is the right one for their network, and by all means it is. So yeah, these are the advantages and some of the disadvantages of this AP on a stick survey. I hope this made sense. I hope this was clear. It takes a bit of time and practice on the ground. It is not something easy. So what I did was, before my first AP on a stick, I took the floor plan of my office floor, and so I had to go to Philippines to do an AP on a stick survey. So what I did was, before going there, before my first assignment, I had to I took a floor plan of my office floor. I got the tripod ready, and I did the AP on a stick of my office floor, just to get the idea, just to get the understanding, and just to understand what kind of data I'm going to capture, and so that I can replicate the same thing and do not make a mistake at the customer location. So yeah, you need practice for this big time, because it is not easy to just execute this the first time on the ground. So practice before you go and do this in the customer scenario, and I think you should be golden.